The worst sound in a combat zone isn't gunfire. It's the satellite phone ringing at 0300. When you're 6,000 miles away, wearing body armor, and a pediatric nurse tells you your 7-year-old daughter is in the trauma ward, the war around you vanishes. A new one begins. The dust in Camp Lemonnier, Djibouti, has a way of getting into your soul. It coats your boots, your uniform, and your lungs. But on the night of October 12th, the suffocating heat of the African Horn was the last thing on my mind. I am Captain Emma Collins, an intelligence officer attached to a joint task force. My job is to find people who don't want to be found and dismantle threats before they materialize. I am trained to be cold, analytical, and unbreakable. But I am also Lily's mother, and on that night, every ounce of my military discipline evaporated into pure, unadulterated terror. To understand how my little girl ended up in a Seattle trauma center while I was half a world away, you have to understand the bitter reality of being a mother in the armed forces. 2 years prior, my ex-husband, Greg Harrison, used my deployment schedule against me in family court. Greg is a civilian architect, a man whose biggest daily crisis was a delayed shipment of Italian marble. He wore his tailored suits and painted a picture of me as an absent, war-obsessed mother who prioritized the army over her own flesh and blood. The judge, swayed by Greg's stable 9-to-5 life and a newly minted, picture-perfect fiancée named Rebecca, awarded him primary custody. Rebecca was the kind of woman who belonged on a magazine cover. She was a lifestyle influencer, a PTA president, and a master manipulator. To the world, she was the devoted stepmother, constantly posting photos of her and Lily baking cookies or going to the park. But Lily's timid voice on our weekly video calls told a different story. "Rebecca doesn't like it when I talk too loud, Mommy," she would whisper, her eyes darting off screen. "Rebecca says my toys are messy, so she threw them away. I documented everything. I hired lawyers, I fought from thousands of miles away, but family court moves at a glacial pace, and the military's mission doesn't pause for custody battles. I was forced to board a C-130, bound for the Horn of Africa, leaving my heart in the hands of a woman I didn't trust, and a man who was too blind to see her true colors." Then came the call. I was in the Tactical Operations Center, TOC, the glow of multiple monitors casting a blue hue over the faces of the night shift. The secure line blinked. Usually, it was a briefing from European Command. This time, the voice on the other end wasn't a general. It was a civilian. "Captain Collins? This is Brenda Hodges. I'm the charge nurse at Seattle Children's Hospital." The blood drained from my face. The hum of the servers around me seemed to fade into a deafening silence. "Is it Lily? What happened?" "She's stable, Captain, but she's been admitted. She has a fractured radius in her left arm, a severe concussion, and, well, Captain, there are defensive bruises on her forearms and back." My hand gripped the edge of the console so hard, my knuckles turned white. "Where is Greg? Where is her father?" "Mr. Harrison is on a business trip in Chicago." Brenda's voice was steady, but laced with a quiet, professional urgency. She was brought in by her stepmother, Rebecca. "Rebecca claims Lily fell down a flight of oak stairs while playing. But Captain Collins, the injuries don't match the physics of a fall. The bruises are clustered. They look like grip marks." A cold, terrifying clarity washed over me. Grip marks. Rebecca had put her hands on my daughter. "Is Rebecca there now?" I asked, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous register that made the staff sergeant next to me turn his head in concern. "She is in the waiting room. She's currently arguing with the attending physician, demanding to take Lily home against medical advice. Because Mr. Harrison has primary legal custody, and he isn't here, she is the legal guardian on site. By law, if she insists on discharging her, our hands are tied until Child Protective Services can get a social worker here. And CPS is backlogged until tomorrow morning." "Listen to me, Brenda," I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Do whatever it takes to stall. Order more tests. Tell her you need a neurological observation. You do not let that woman take my daughter out of that hospital. Do you understand me?" "I will do my best, Captain, but you need to get here, or you need to get someone here." I hung up the phone and immediately dialed Greg. It went straight to voicemail. He was likely at some corporate dinner, blissfully unaware that his new wife was currently trying to drag his battered daughter out of an emergency room. I called Rebecca. Blocked. The walls of the TOC felt like they were closing in. I stood up, the chair scraping violently against the concrete floor, and sprinted toward the commander's quarters. I didn't care about protocol. I didn't care about the chain of command. I needed a flight out of Africa, and I needed it 5 minutes ago. Colonel Bradley was an old-school ranger, tough but fair. When I burst into his office and explained the situation, the color drained from his face. But the reality of our location was a logistical nightmare. "Emma, I am so sorry," he said, pulling up the airspace manifest on his screen. "We are in the middle of a restricted airspace lockdown due to the operations in the Red Sea. The earliest military transport I can put you on doesn't leave for 48 hours. Even if I authorize emergency leave, a civilian flight out of Djibouti International won't get you to Seattle for 3 days." "Sir, she is trying to take her from the hospital right now," I pleaded, my voice cracking for the first time. "If she takes Lily back to that house, I don't know what she'll do to her." Colonel Bradley looked at me, a deep sorrow in his eyes. "Captain, I will cut your orders right now. You are relieved of duty. Pack your bags and get to the airstrip to wait for the C-17. But as for tonight, you need to call in a favor." He was right, I couldn't be there. But the United States Army is a brotherhood and a sisterhood, and we take care of our own. Joint Base Lewis McChord, JBLM, is located roughly 40 miles south of Seattle Children's Hospital. 2 years ago, before I transferred to military intelligence, I was a logistics commander there. I spent years eating dirt, sweating, and bleeding alongside some of the fiercest soldiers on the planet. I didn't just have colleagues in Washington State. I had family. I sat on my cot in the barracks, the dusty fan spinning uselessly overhead, and made a call I knew would change everything. The phone rang twice. "Collins, it's 0400, a gruff voice answered. "Ox, I need you." Master Sergeant Thomas Ox Ford was a giant of a man, a combat engineer with 2 Purple Hearts and a protective streak a mile wide. We had survived a convoy ambush together in Afghanistan. He was the godfather to Lily. "What's wrong?" The sleep instantly vanished from his voice, replaced by cold, tactical readiness. "It's Lily. She's at Seattle Children's. Rebecca put her in the ER. Broken arm, bruises. Greg is out of town, and Rebecca is trying to pull her out against medical advice right now. I'm stuck in Djibouti. My flight doesn't leave for 48 hours. Silence hung on the line for exactly 2 seconds. "Say less," Ox growled. "I'm waking up J-Mac and Ruiz. We're wheels up in 5 minutes." Captain Jessica J. Mac McIntyre was an Army lawyer, a JAG officer who knew the civilian code better than most judges. Staff Sergeant Ruiz was military police. I wasn't just sending friends. I was sending a tactical unit. "Ox," I said, my voice shaking. "Be careful. We have no jurisdiction there. The civilian police—" "Collins!" Ox interrupted softly. "You let me worry about the cops. You just get on that plane. Nobody is touching our girl." Over the next 3 hours, I sat in the sweltering heat of the transit terminal, staring at my phone as the updates rolled in. Through a combination of text messages and quick phone calls, the showdown at Seattle Children's Hospital unfolded in my mind like a movie. At 0515, a heavy-duty black Silverado pulled up to the emergency room entrance. Master Sergeant Ford, Captain McIntyre, and Staff Sergeant Ruiz stepped out. They hadn't bothered to change into civilian clothes. They were in full operational camouflage pattern, OCP uniforms, their combat boots echoing loudly on the pristine linoleum floors of the hospital lobby. Brenda the nurse later told me it was like watching the cavalry arrive. The air in the waiting room literally shifted. They found Rebecca at the nurse's station. She was throwing a full-blown tantrum, her designer handbag slung over her shoulder, jabbing her manicured finger into the chest of a weary resident doctor. "I have the paperwork right here," Rebecca was screeching. "I am her legal guardian. My husband is her father. You are holding my stepdaughter hostage, and I am calling my lawyer." "Ma'am, the child has a traumatic brain injury," the doctor pleaded. She needs to be monitored. She needs her own bed, Rebecca snapped, turning to storm down the hallway toward Lily's room. She didn't make it 2 steps. Master Sergeant Ford stepped into the corridor, effectively blocking the entire hallway with his massive frame. He crossed his arms over his chest, the combat patch on his right shoulder catching the harsh fluorescent light. J-Max stood to his left, holding a legal pad. Ruiz stood to his right, perfectly at parade rest. "Excuse me," Rebecca huffed, trying to step around him. "Move." Ox didn't blink. He didn't flinch. He just looked down at her with eyes that had seen the worst of humanity. "You're not going anywhere near that room, ma'am." "Who the hell do you think you are?" Rebecca shrieked, her face flushing crimson. "I am a civilian. You have no authority here. I am calling the police." "Please do." J-Max stepped forward, her voice calm and authoritative. "My name is Captain McIntyre. I'm a legal representative for Captain Emma Collins, the child's biological mother. We are here as concerned family friends. We aren't touching you, ma'am, but we aren't moving either." Rebecca was furious. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911, screaming that rogue military personnel were harassing her and kidnapping her child. 10 minutes later, 2 officers from the Seattle Police Department arrived. Officer Trent, a veteran cop who looked like he was 1 shift away from retirement, walked in with his hand resting casually on his duty belt. He surveyed the scene. A shrieking, impeccably dressed woman and a wall of silent, unmoving United States soldiers blocking a hospital room. "All right, let's calm down," Officer Trent said, approaching Ox. "Sergeant, you know you boys don't have jurisdiction in a civilian hospital. The lady says she's the legal guardian. You need to step aside." Ox looked at the police officer. "Officer, with all due respect, inside that room is a 7-year-old girl with defensive bruises and a fractured arm. The charge nurse suspects abuse. By law, this woman shouldn't be allowed within 50 feet of that child until CPS completes an investigation." Rebecca gasped dramatically. "That is slander. She fell." Officer Trent sighed. "Look, the CPS worker won't be here until 9 a.m. Until then, she has the legal right to sign the kid out. Now step aside, or I'm going to have to arrest you for obstruction and trespassing." The tension in the hallway was thick enough to cut with a knife. Ruiz subtly shifted his stance. J-Mac gripped her legal pad tighter. "Officer," Ox said, his voice dropping to a low, gravelly whisper that sent a chill down the spine of everyone listening. "I have clearance to operate in active war zones. I have survived IEDs and ambushes. You think a trespassing charge is going to make me move?" Ox leaned in just a fraction of an inch. "Go ahead, put the cuffs on me, but you're going to need a lot more backup to move me from this door. Because until Captain Collins gets here, this hallway is occupied territory." Officer Trent stared at Ox. He looked at the bruised, terrified little girl through the window of the hospital door. He looked at Rebecca, who was tapping her foot, radiating entitled impatience rather than maternal concern. Trent slowly took his hand off his belt. He turned to Rebecca. "Ma'am," Trent said, pulling out a notepad, "I'm officially opening a domestic incident investigation, which means this child is now part of an active crime scene inquiry. Nobody leaves this hospital until the detectives arrive." Rebecca's jaw dropped. "You can't do that." "I just did," Trent replied. He looked back at Ox and gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. "Thousands of miles away, sitting on my duffel bag in the suffocating African heat, I got the text from J-Mac. Room secured. Police are on our side. CPS is en route. Get home, mama." I closed my eyes and let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 2 years. The ghost platoon had held the line. But the war wasn't over. Greg was flying back, the lawyers were circling, and I still had to cross an ocean to get my daughter back. The military had secured the perimeter. Now, it was time for the mother to go to war. The journey from the Horn of Africa to the Pacific Northwest is an agonizing blur of deafening engine noise, sterile military terminals, and a relentless, gnawing anxiety that eats at your stomach lining. I managed to secure a jump seat on a C-17 Globemaster headed to Ramstein Air Base in Germany. From there, I bought a commercial ticket on the first flight to Seattle. For 36 hours, I existed in a state of suspended animation, fueled by terrible coffee and the updates pinging into my phone every time we hit a pocket of Wi-Fi. While I was somewhere over the Atlantic, the situation at Seattle Children's Hospital escalated. Greg had finally landed from his business trip in Chicago. I expected him to be horrified. I expected the father I once knew to rush to his little girl's bedside and demand answers from the woman who put her there. Instead, Greg arrived at the hospital flanked by Richard Caldwell, a high-priced, slick-haired family law attorney who looked like he billed by the breath. J-Mac texted me the play-by-play. Greg didn't even go to Lily's room first. He went straight to the nurse's station to retrieve Rebecca, who was playing the victim with Oscar-worthy dedication. When Greg and his lawyer tried to assert custody and forcefully discharge Lily, they hit the brick wall that was Master Sergeant Ford. Caldwell threatened lawsuits, court-martials, and police intervention. Ox simply crossed his arms, smiled a chilling, battle-hardened smile, and said, "File whatever you want, counselor. But until my captain gets here, the only way you're moving this child is if you can move me. And I strongly advise against trying." But Greg's lawyer was cunning. Caldwell knew he couldn't physically bypass my unit, so he went over their heads. He filed an emergency injunction with a local judge to compel the hospital to release Lily, arguing that a rogue military unit was unlawfully detaining a child and traumatizing her further. Worse, Rebecca had taken out her phone and started a live stream in the hospital lobby. I watched the video from seat 14B, my hands shaking with rage. Rebecca was crying perfectly manicured tears, wearing a designer sweater, telling her thousands of followers about the nightmare she was enduring. "My sweet stepdaughter had a terrible accident on the stairs," Rebecca sobbed to the camera. And now, her absentee, military-obsessed mother has sent her deranged army friends to hold us hostage at the hospital. Please pray for our family. She was spinning the narrative. She was creating a digital alibi. And Greg, ever concerned with his public image and his upcoming promotion to senior partner at his architecture firm, was standing right behind her, nodding somberly. They were going to bury the truth under a mountain of PR and legal red tape. I was thousands of miles away, trapped in a metal tube, but I was not helpless. I am a military intelligence officer. My entire career is built on finding the invisible threads of truth in a sea of deception. I pulled out my laptop, paid for the exorbitant in-flight Wi-Fi, and went to work. If Rebecca was claiming Lily fell down the oak stairs, I needed to prove she didn't. I needed a timeline. I needed data. My mind raced through the layout of Greg's house. Greg was obsessed with smart home technology. He had sensors on the doors, the thermostat, and the security system. When we were still married, I had set up the master administrative account for the home network. A man as arrogant as Greg wouldn't have bothered to change the root passwords after the divorce. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I bypassed the standard login portal and accessed the raw router logs for their home network. I couldn't see video. Rebecca had conveniently claimed the interior cameras were unplugged for renovations during the police interview, but I didn't need video. I needed device handshakes. I looked at the timestamps for the day of the incident. 14:02 p.m. The front door unlocks. Rebecca's phone connects to the Wi-Fi. 14:15 p.m. The smart thermostat in Lily's upstairs bedroom registers a sudden manual spike in temperature. Someone bumped into it. 14:16 p.m. The router logs showed a violent disruption in the signal connection to Lily's smart speaker, indicating it had been knocked off the bedside table. But the final nail in the coffin was Lily's smartwatch. I had bought it for her 7th birthday. It wasn't just for calling me. It had a built-in accelerometer and a heart rate monitor. I accessed the cloud backup for the watch's health data. At exactly 14:18 p.m., Lily's heart rate spiked to 160 beats per minute. At 14:19 p.m., the accelerometer recorded a violent, lateral impact, a strike, not a tumble, down a 45-degree staircase. Furthermore, the GPS telemetry showed the watch was in Lily's bedroom, on the 2nd floor, the entire time. She never went near the stairs. I compiled the raw data, the IP logs, and the telemetry graphs into a secure, encrypted PDF. I sent it to J-Mac, with a single line of text. I have the weapon. See you in 3 hours. The Seattle rain was coming down in sheets when my taxi finally pulled up to the emergency room entrance. I didn't bother grabbing my duffel bag from the trunk. I was still wearing my dusty OCP uniform, my boots heavy with African sand, my combat patch soaked with Pacific Northwest rain. I pushed through the sliding glass doors, the adrenaline completely overriding my exhaustion. The scene in the waiting area was exactly as J-Mac had described. Ox, massive and immovable, was standing guard by the corridor doors. Ruiz was pacing, and J-Mac was leaning against a wall, casually reading a legal brief, while Greg's lawyer, Caldwell, paced furiously, barking into his cell phone. When Ox saw me, his rigid posture broke. He gave me a sharp nod, his eyes softening just a fraction. "Captain's on deck," he rumbled. Greg turned around. The color drained from his face. He looked at my uniform, then at the absolute murder in my eyes, and he instinctively took a step back. Rebecca, however, crossed her arms, feigning righteous indignation. "Oh, look who finally decided to show up," Rebecca sneered. "Mother of the Year, are you going to call off your attack dogs now?" "Emma, this is completely out of line," Greg stammered, trying to regain his composure. "You can't just deploy military personnel to harass my wife. We are taking Lily home, and I am filing for a permanent restraining order against you." "Are you?" I asked, my voice deadly quiet. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I didn't give them the hysterical mother routine they were hoping for. I walked past them as if they were ghosts and approached the local CPS investigator and Detective Trent, who had just stepped out of an adjacent conference room. "Detective Trent? I'm Captain Emma Collins. Lily is my daughter." "Captain," Trent said, extending a hand. "I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. We're in a tough spot here. The medical staff suspects abuse, but Miss Rebecca maintains it was a fall down the stairs. Without a witness or a confession, and with Mr. Harrison asserting his custody rights, I don't have enough probable cause to hold them or arrest her." Caldwell smirked, stepping forward. "Exactly, Detective. This is a tragic accident being weaponized by a bitter ex-wife. We are leaving." "Not yet," I said. I pulled my tablet out of my assault pack and set it on the nurse's station counter. I unlocked the screen and pulled up the encrypted file. "Detective, my ex-husband claims the interior security cameras were disabled. However, he forgot that I hold a degree in cybersecurity, and I am a senior intelligence analyst for the United States Army. I still have legal access to the home's router logs, as my name is technically still on the ISP billing account." Caldwell's smirk vanished. Rebecca swallowed hard. "What is this?" Greg asked, his voice trembling. I ignored him, speaking directly to the detective. At 14:18 p.m. on Tuesday, Rebecca claimed Lily fell down the stairs in the main hallway. But the telemetry data from Lily's pediatric smartwatch, which I purchased, and which is registered to my cloud account, shows Lily's heart rate spiked in her bedroom. The accelerometer data shows a lateral, blunt force impact consistent with being thrown against a wall, not falling downstairs. Furthermore, the GPS data proves Lily never left her bedroom until 14:45 p.m., when she was dragged to the car. I tapped the screen, bringing up the graphs. I pointed to the jagged red line. "This is the exact moment my daughter's arm was broken," I said, staring dead into Rebecca's eyes. "In her bedroom, not on the stairs." The silence in the hallway was absolute. That's circumstantial," Rebecca shrieked, her voice cracking. "That proves nothing. The watch could be malfunctioning." "Oh, I'm not done." J-Mac stepped forward, handing a printed sheet of paper to Detective Trent. "While Captain Collins was flying home, I took the liberty of running a background check on Miss Rebecca through the National Registry. Did you know she had a prior child endangerment charge expunged in the state of Nevada 5 years ago? A plea deal for locking her previous boyfriend's kid in a closet?" Greg whipped his head around to look at his wife. "Rebecca, what is she talking about?" "It was a misunderstanding," Rebecca cried, backing away. Detective Trent looked at the tablet, then at the criminal background printout, and finally at Rebecca. He didn't say a word. He just unclipped the radio from his shoulder. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4. Send a transport to Seattle Children's. I have a female suspect in custody for felony child abuse and domestic assault." Rebecca tried to run, but Staff Sergeant Ruiz subtly sidestepped, blocking her path just long enough for Detective Trent to grab her wrist and snap the handcuffs shut. The influencer who had been crying for the cameras 20 minutes ago was now screaming profanities as she was dragged out of the hospital lobby. Greg stood there, utterly paralyzed. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of horror and realization. He had protected a monster, and in doing so, he had lost his daughter forever. "Greg," I said softly, "if you ever come within 100 yards of my daughter again, I won't use a lawyer. I'll use everything I learned in the desert. Walk away." He didn't say a word. He turned and walked out the sliding doors, alone in the rain. I left the tablet on the counter and walked down the hallway. Ox, J-Mac, and Ruiz stepped aside, forming an impromptu honor guard as I reached the door to room 214. I pushed the door open. The room was dark, illuminated only by the rhythmic glow of the medical monitors. In the center of the bed, buried under a mountain of white blankets, was a tiny, fragile figure. Her left arm was encased in a heavy cast. Her sweet face was marred by a dark purple bruise along her cheekbone. Tears, hot, blinding, and unstoppable, finally broke through my defenses. I dropped my assault pack on the floor and rushed to the side of the bed, falling to my knees. Lily's eyes fluttered open. She looked at my dusty uniform, at the flag patch on my shoulder, and a weak, beautiful smile spread across her battered face. "Mommy," she whispered, "you came back." I leaned forward, pressing my forehead gently against her uninjured cheek, breathing in the scent of hospital soap and my little girl. "I'm here, baby," I sobbed, wrapping my arms around her with agonizing care. "Mommy's here, and the bad guys are gone." Sometimes the toughest battles aren't fought on foreign soil, but right at home to protect the ones we love. Lily is safe now, healing every day, and we are finally together. No rank or medal will ever mean more to me than being her mother. If you found strength in our story of survival and justice, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories.